Swamp Thing, episode 4. We are we are definitely gonna have to talk about what's going on in the swamp because this episode started the way the last episode it continued from the last episode, because remember in the last episode Avery Sunderland had just murdered his accountant, and he had brought the body's remains into the swamp in order to bury him. While he was there, he was like seeing flashbacks of like his daddy, of like when him and his daddy were a kid and they were going hunting or some fishing or crocodile hunting or whatever. And he watched his daddy kill a crocodile, and he was just having like daddy flashbacks. So it then takes us to another father and son combination where the two of them were going in the swamp. They were trying to cut down certain types of trees because apparently the dad was saying that this particular type of tree is very valuable, this, that, and the third. So while he's trying to cut the tree down, he has a chainsaw, he's trying to cut the tree down. This dead corpse falls out of the sky, lands on top of his son, and it looked like the spirit of this corpse bit the son like on the arm or whatever. So then, they see the corpse, the son and the dad, they get scared, and then they run off. Swamp Thing shows up in the background for his 2-second cameo, and then we move forward. The son, the one that got bit by the corpse, he shows up for work the next day because apparently he works for Liz's dad. Because remember, Liz's dad, he owns a restaurant, and Liz works at the restaurant. The kid works at the restaurant as like the dishwasher or the busboy or whatever. While he's washing dishes, he starts hallucinating and he sees a snake on his arm. When he sees the snake on his arm, he immediately starts freaking out. He's trying to like shake it, trying to get it off. It's not getting off. He's like going crazy. Liz and the dad show up and they're looking at him like, bro, like it was really good. And then, he gets to the point where because he can't get the snake off his arm, he's like, there's a snake. And they're just like, yo, there is no snake. What's going on? He then takes a knife and starts stabbing the snake, quote unquote. He starts stabbing the snake, but from Liz and her dad's perspective, he was stabbing his own arm. He was stabbing his own flesh. He was cutting his own flesh, and then the snake still wasn't coming off, like nothing was happening. So Liz and her dad are freaking out at this point. And then the guy got to the point where like he was trying to get the snake off his arm. He basically took his entire arm with the snake on it and stuck it in the garbage disposal, turned it on, and he cut off his own arm. And because of that, I don't know, he lost so much blood. That was gross. He lost a lot of blood, and then I think, he eventually, like, he basically passed away. But there was a point where, like, Liz and her father were trying to pull him out of the garbage disposal, and when that happened, the son kind of, like, was like, get off me, and then he scratched her father on the arm right before, like, he dropped, right before, like, he dropped dead on the floor. So, so now Liz is just, like, Liz is very smart, and I like Liz. Like, I like Liz's character because as soon as she saw what was happening, her first thing was, this got something to do with that damn swamp and that Swamp Thing and Abby Arcade. So she calls Abby to come down to try to figure out what's going on in the situation. Abby, meanwhile, she's back at she's back at the swamp. She tries to go and see Alec, because remember I said she's probably gonna go see him, because she felt guilty because she was dancing with homeboy, with Maddie in the last episode, and Swamp Thing caught her dance with the next dude. So she shows up to the swamp. She's calling for Alec, and she's like, Alec, where are you? And he's just like, go away. No, he ain't say that, but he was looking at her like, I saw you with the next man last night. So she's just like, oh, I'm here trying to save you. Like, I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with you so we can cure you. And he gave it a look like, now you worried about me? He's like, you were worried last night. So she was like, let me get a tissue sample. So he kept his distance, which I thought was crazy. Because it's not like he like embraced her or walked up to her. So he gave her a tissue sample. She took the tissue sample, and then she was like, "Yo, I'm about to go analyze this, and I'm gonna get back with you." And then he was just like, "Yo, be careful because there's trouble brewing out there in the swamp." So he's just like, "Be careful, Abby." So she goes back to the hospital. She's at the hospital. She's looking at the sample. Dr. Woodrow shows up. Him and Abby continue their pissing contest, like their dick measuring contest, and it got to a point where she actually let him see the sample that he was working on, because he specializes in that type of like biology. So, he asked her, he was like, yo, can I take a look? He took a look, and then he was just like, oh shit. And then he asked her, he was like, well, what are you going to do with the sample? And then she was just like, I haven't figured it out yet. And then he was just like, well, since I'm trained in the matter, and this is my expertise. He's like, yo, you should let me look at it. Now, Abby doesn't trust him because she's just like, bro, like, you kind of work for Avery Sunderland. And then she was just like, I don't want to She's like, I don't want to let you take a look at this because you might sell me out to Sunderland. And plus, and then he was just like, I wouldn't do that. And then she's like, if I let you look at this, I'm gonna need your confidentiality that you're not gonna share this with the public. And then he's just like, fuck the public, which I thought was hilarious. So, so she gave him the sample. He's looking at the sample now. Abby leaves the room. She bumps into the Blue Devil in the hallway. He's actually visiting the children, bringing balloons and stuff to the kids. Abby goes and talks to him. She's like, yo, bro, it was really good. I know you had a second job. And he's just like, yeah, the Blue Devil likes to make an appearance. But what he's really doing is he's trying to stay in the hospital to keep tabs on Abby because he knows that his destiny has something to do with her. He knows that his destiny has something to do with protecting her. So he's just trying to stay close. He even asked her, he was like, yo, have we ever met before? And she was like, nah. So he's just like, all right, but he's keeping a respectable distance, but he's still got Abby in his eyesight because he knows that they're connected somehow. So now Abby gets, now Abby goes and sees them. She goes sees little Susie Coyle. She's talking to Susie. And while she's talking to Susie, the Sunderlands show up. Avery and the wife, they show up. They say that, because the patients are getting better, because Abby found out how to treat the disease, quote unquote. People are recovering now. Like, people are healthy now. Like, everything's going back to normal. So the Sunderlands invite everybody, like all the healthy people from the hospital, the nurses, the doctors. He invites everybody down to a good old-fashioned cookout in Moray, Louisiana. Tells everybody, come on down and get yourself a plate. And, meanwhile, the wife, she sees Abby talking to Susie. She ends up butting into the conversation, and then she basically told Abby to kick rocks. She was like, yeah, let me talk to this kid, kick rocks. So so Abby left. So she's sitting down, she's talking to Susie, and then Mrs. Sunderland and Susie, they're getting along, they're laughing and joking. Avery's talking to Abby now. He looks over at his wife and he's just like, yo, I haven't seen my wife smile like that since Shona died. And then I was like, well, that was awkward. And and the two of them were talking or whatever. Yeah, because it's clear what's going on with Mrs. Sunderland, because again, she's destroyed and devastated, understandably so, over the loss of her child. So now, because she didn't get a chance to raise her daughter because her daughter died, she's now looking at she's looking at Susie now as like the new potential. But Abby said she was just like, she was waiting for Susie's uncle to come pick her up. And Avery said, well, the uncle is kind of a drunk. Plus, he already has 4 kids and a wife. So he was just like, he's not the type of person I would depend on. And Abby was like, well, shit, maybe I should reconsider letting her go with him. And he's just like, nah, don't worry about it. He's like, I'll take care of it. So then Abby, Abby gets the call. She goes down to the restaurant. She's talking to Liz, and then Liz told her dead ass. She was just like, yo, he was acting crazy. He was hallucinating. He said he saw a snake. He cut off his own arm. Whatever he had to do had something to do with that damn swamp. And Abby's like, how could you be sure? And she's like, woman, you done saw a swamp creature that used to be Alec Holland. We done watch ghosts and goblins and like zombies coming at you. She was like, don't tell me this ain't got nothing to do with no damn swamp. And then the sheriff shows up, and then she cards the body off. And because she was just doing her police thing, and then once that happened, like while Liz and Abby were talking, her dad now starts hallucinating and starts seeing things, and he's just like, the room went dark, and then he saw like these people dressed in clown masks that were trying to break into his restaurant, and then he started wigging out, and so he busts out the shotgun, and then as soon as he pulls out the shotgun, like Liz and Abby hit the deck, and then she was like, yo, Pops was really good, and he's just like, you ain't gonna take me alive, and then he sees a woman dead on the floor, and he's just like, you killed my mom, and then he starts bucking off like shotgun shots, and then the cop, the sheriff comes back in, and then, she pulled out the gun, she got the gun on the black man with the shotgun, and then, Liz was just like, don't kill my father, and she was just like, yo, if he don't put the gun down, I'm gonna put one up his ass. And then like eventually, like the gun jammed or he ran out of bullets or whatever, and then she ran over to him, and then like she roughed him up, and then they got the gun out of his hand, and then while the sheriff was fighting with him, he scratched her like behind the ear, and then she started bleeding, and then like the dad like snapped out of it. Well, Abby then, he was still kind of like wigging out, but then Abby went in her bag because I guess she keeps like medical supplies with her, and I guess she had a sedative in her bag, so she jammed it into the back of his neck, knocked him out, and then they took him to the hospital. So while they had him at the hospital, he was just telling her, he was just like, he woke up, he felt better. He was just like, yeah, he said that back in the day when he was 12 years old, a group of men dressed in masks broke into the restaurant and they murdered his mom. and he said that he never found the killers. He never found out who murdered his mom, but he said he always had nightmares about it. He always, had like bad dreams, but he said he never had a bad dream when he was awake. He said this is the first time like he saw this whole thing play out while he was still awake, and it wasn't in his dreams. So now like Liz and Abby, they're starting to put two and two together because they're just like, all right, something going down. Abby goes back to the swamp. She goes and talks to Swamp Thing about the whole disease situation. Swamp Thing tells her, he's like, it's not a disease per se. It's more like he's basically said it was the swamp. It was like an evil spirit of the swamp, and it infects people with the anger and the rage and everything. But then he also said that this we'll just call it we'll call it a disease for now, but he said that the disease doesn't belong in the outside world. He said it belongs here in the swamp. So you have to find a way to get it back here, so we can return it to where, to whence it came. And then, he told her, he was just like, yo, be careful because like, he's like, it's going down. But he said that the way it moves is like it travels from host to host to host. And then that's when she put two and two together. She was just like, it's being transmitted by blood, and then, she immediately knew like who was next. So she ran back to town. She picked up Liz. Liz had found some articles that said that back in the day, something similar to this happened where people, were infected with something and they started hallucinating and seeing things like their greatest fears almost. But then she said like, the disease was bouncing from person to person. And then, Abby was like, well, then how did the disease stop? And she said what happened was the last person that had the disease disappeared and nobody ever saw him. And then Abby was just like, that's who the corpse is. The corpse was that person. He knew he was infected. He ran back to but the guy he knew he was infected. He ran to the swamp to make sure that nobody else got infected by the disease. And while he was in the swamp, he basically like killed himself to make sure that the disease never spread. And I guess he put himself up in a tree to make sure nobody can find his body. But once, like the father and son in the beginning had, knocked his body out of the tree, the son got reinfected at that point. So now they're just like, okay, so the sheriff is obviously the next victim. So they're going down to the party because like it's nighttime now and everybody's going to that Sunderland party, and that's where the sheriff is. So the sheriff is down there, everybody's partying, having a good time. The Sunderlands are there, Susie's there, and then Susie was with the Sunderland's maid, and then, Avery was telling the wife, he was just like, like the uncle, like he's kind of a drunk and he has a family, whatever. So he was like, maybe the girl can stay with us, like maybe, like she can come home with us because we can actually take care of her. So of course the wife jumped at that because, like the wife was thinking that anyway. So again, because of her PSD for losing her daughter. So then after that, while we're also at the party, Daniel, the Blue Devil, shows up, and then he goes upstairs. Well, he goes upstairs, and while he's upstairs, he sees Madam. I think he called her Madam X, like the blind woman, Madam X. And then she's like, let me hear your footsteps, Daniel. And he was like, how do you know it's me? And she's like, because I sensed it. And then he told her, he was just like, listen, he was like, yo, what's going on? He was just like, yo, tell me what my destiny is. Tell me what's going on. What's the deal with the swamp and the cards? And then she was like, me not know, Daniel. She was like, to be honest, he's like, the cards done change. I may not see it very well, but all I know that something is coming. She's like, there's danger coming, and you never see it coming unless you protect Abigail. And then he was just like, what do I do? And then she was just like, I don't know, but you got to be ready. And then he was just like, well, when this danger finally does show up, he was like, you gonna be here, right? She's like, I'm gonna do all that I can to help you, but it's the Blue Devil's responsibility to stand alone, which was make sure as a hero. And then so now he's really just like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. He is so confused about what he's, but she even said, she was just like, when you came to me 8 years ago, you said you struck a deal with the devil, a deal that captured Marie. And then she was just like, your destiny is here. So apparently he struck a deal with some magical being, which is why he's like, his soul is bound to Marie to prevent some tragedy that's coming. And it looks like the tragedy has to do with the swamp and this disease and all this other crazy stuff that's going down right now. So, so he goes back downstairs to the party. So now the sheriff is there. She starts freaking out. She envisions a situation, because the disease, obviously, it plays on everyone's like biggest fear. Like, I guess the kid, he was afraid of snakes. Like the dad, his biggest fear was the situation where his mom died. And then the sheriff, she saw a scenario where her son tried to break up a fight and then got stabbed to death. So and the killer was still there laughing. So now she's imagining her son's dead. So she's on the floor trying to, like, stop his chest from bleeding. And she's just like, no, Maddie, they killed you. And then the killer is still there. So she takes out a gun, and now she's got a gun pointed at everybody at the party. So everybody at the party is freaking out. Then she's like, I'm gonna kill you, you son of a bitch. And then, like, Abby shows up, and then she's trying to talk the sheriff down. And then just before the sheriff, like, puts two in Abby's brain, Daniel shows up. He knocks the cop down. He knocks the sheriff down. He kicks the gun out of her hand. But then while Abby was struggling with the sheriff scratched Abby on the arms. And then when that happened, the sheriff immediately snapped out of whatever trance she was in. Maddie actually showed up. And then when she saw her son, like, she was just like, oh shit. She's like, I thought you were dead. And then, Abby got up, and then she ran outside. And then she saw Liz, and then she told Liz, she was like, back up, because she's like, I'm infected and I got to get this infection out of here. I got to take it back to the swamp. So Abby goes and she runs back to the swamp. When she gets to the swamp, the hallucinations start for her. And the hallucination that she saw was a man, and a man where you couldn't see his face. And when she was envisioning this man, the man walked up, grabbed her, yoked her up. And he said something along the lines of, you thought you'd be able to, stay away from your mom, or like you didn't think I'd be able to find you and your mom, or so it had something to do with her mom, that's something to do with her. So I'm like, oh, so clearly this is her daddy. So clearly the situation is she had an abusive dad, or her dad was a murderer or a psychopath, or whatever the case may be. Her and her mom got away from the dad, and her biggest fear was that the dad was going to track them down and kill her and her mom. So so that was what her fear was. So, but the guy, like, the being, so the being with no face was her dad. He had her up by the throat and was choking her out. But then when we saw what was going on in reality, the person who had her was actually Swamp Thing, and he wasn't choking her. He was kind of like hugging her, because he was trying to get her to calm down so he could remove the disease from her. But she's freaking out because, like, she thinks she's getting killed. So Swamp Thing removes the disease from her. Abby hits the floor. She snaps out of it. Swamp Thing takes the disease back to the original corpse that it came from. He put the disease back into the corpse, and then he used the dirt to swallow up the corpse and pull the corpse down, down beneath the dirt, so nobody can never come across it again. And now, like, this entity, like this spiritual disease, whatever, is now buried 6, 15, 24, 24 feet beneath the surface. Abby snaps out of it, and then she's just like, oh my God, what happened? And then he was just like, like, the disease is buried, and, like, all is good now. So the two of them are talking, and while the two of them are talking, he asked her, he was like, yo, flat out, what did you see? And then she was like, oh, I saw, like, this creature coming after mom. I was like, just tell him it's your daddy. So, it's like she was afraid, that was her fear or whatever. I mean, I thought she would have saw Shauna. I thought she would have had visions of Shauna, but I guess, we didn't get there yet. So it was kind of weird that she saw her dad, but, that could be a fear for her too. But I would have thought that the Shauna thing, because it was more recent, would have been something that she would have seen first. So, as I said, so they're having a conversation, and then, she basically tells him, she's like, listen, she was like, I'm not going to stop trying to cure you. She was just like, yeah, I'm a doctor. She's like, your bio, the two of us together can figure something out. And then he's like, but what's happening? He's like, it's not biological or scientific. He's like, it's damn near magical. And then she's like, well, I don't accept that. So, so the two of them are going to work together to try to cure Alec Holland of this whole disease situation. So then, like I said, so Abby leaves, and then, he tells her, he's just like, whatever's happening. He told her, he was just like, listen, the next time you come back, be careful, because whatever this is, a bigger plan is starting. He was just like, yo, something's going down. So he was like, if you're going to come visit me, just be careful. And then, like, she leaves, and that's how they end that. And then finally, we go back to the Sunderland house, and the Sunderlands actually have Susie at the house with them. She's eating dinner. The Sunderlands are talking. And then he was just like, yeah, I thought she could just stay here for a few days. And then, like, maybe she'll stay with us. I miss having a child in the house. So, of course, like, the wife jumped on it. And then Avery goes outside, and then Susie's uncle is outside. Avery gives the uncle a check and was just like, yo, here's the money. Don't spend it all in one place. Come to find out, Avery Sunderland, he's trying to get his wife to give him money to fund the research that he needs for Dr. Woodrow. The wife in the last episode said, no, I'm not giving you the money. So what he's doing is he paid the uncle to let him take custody of Susie. He's going to use Susie to break down his wife's barrier wall. So if having a child in the house can snap her out of, like, her PSD, and can make her more happier, like more giving, he can kind of like sway his way into her to try to get the money that he needs to do the thing. So he's using Susie as a ploy to trick his wife into giving him money, and that's kind of jacked up, but it's typical Avery Sunderland. And that was it. That was basically it for the episode. So yeah, this is I mean it's October. This is Halloween month, so this thing is perfect. Like what's going on right now is very perfect. And we got a little bit more insight into Abby's character. We got more insight into like Liz's, family backstory. Like I said, I'm really liking Liz. Like Liz is a G. Like Liz is like, because in these DC CW, DC Universe shows, there's always a Diggle, and the sidekick is usually black. I mean, Oliver had Diggle. Kara has Alex, but Black Lightning got Gambi, I guess. But Liz is Abby's Diggle. So that's pretty cool. Like I said, because we'll see what Liz can do, because I guess now that her dad's in the hospital, Liz is going to end up running the restaurant now. So hopefully Liz will take a more like a more like prominent role like going forward. So thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you think of today's episode. Now that we're getting a little bit more in, now that the swamp is coming alive and the diseases and the corpses and everything is starting to come up, and everybody's saying there's something about to go down in Murray, Louisiana. Leave a comment, hit the notification bell, like and/or subscribe. Episode 5 is coming next. And until next time, when we review The Green, take care, everybody. And I'm out this bitch.